Hello everyone, hope your Monday is off to a good start. A couple things you all need to be aware of. Number one, we have an updated course schedule that has been uploaded. As I announced in an announcement on the course and sent you guys an email with the information too, we are going to be taking exam 1 this week. It's going to be taken through Talon, okay, and it is going to be open note. Okay, you will take it at your own time. Just must be taken prior to November 9th. Okay, I will get a list of course concepts that you will need to know for the exam uploaded tomorrow. Okay, that way you can start putting together your notes and what you think will be valuable and what you are going to need to have in front of you. There will be a time limit on the test. It's going to be 2 hours. Generally speaking, it takes people around a half hour to complete this test. So 2 hours should be more than enough time. Okay. After that, when we meet next week, a week from today, Group A, you'll be delivering your informative speeches. Group B, you'll be delivering your informative speeches on Wednesday. Okay? So make sure we're preparing for those as well. If you don't feel like you have an idea of what they need to look like, you need to take a look at Chapter 11 again. Okay? I give you really the template and structure you should be speaking from and tell you exactly how your speeches should look. So, this is Chapter 6. That's connecting listening and thinking in the communication process. This is going to be the last chapter we cover that will be on Exam 1. So I will upload a lecture on Wednesday. That will be for Exam 2. It will go under our second exam. So this will be the last piece of information here, last pieces of information that you'll need to know for Exam 1. The first distinction I want to draw for everyone is the difference between hearing and listening. Okay? Hearing is the passive physiological process in which sound is received by the ear. Okay? Listening is the active process of receiving, constructing meaning from, and responding to spoken or nonverbal messages. Okay? So there is a difference there, right? And I think we as humans tend to think if we're hearing something, we're listening. Right? There's a massive difference there, and as we're going to talk about here in a few minutes, hearing is actually only one of the components when it comes to listening. Okay? I want to show you guys a video real quick.
It is crucial that you listen, Dwight. Also, you want to respect their... Are you listening now?
Yes.
Okay, well, you have to show us.
That's impossible. Listening happens in the ear and in the brain. I mean, some organisms have external hairs that vibrate to indicate auditory stimulation, but unfortunately, our external hairs don't vibrate at all.
Huh. Uh-huh.
What are you doing?
A little smile and a nod shows that I hear you. Got it?
Kind of.
Nellie, why don't you tell Dwight what we were doing earlier today, and Dwight, you show us that you're listening.
Well, we were in the warehouse where we were discussing the mural that I've commissioned Pam to paint there. We were talking about the colour schemes and the major themes we want to hit. Children of the world coming together, cutting down trees to make paper, but not in a child laboury way.
It's just up and down. Just a regular nod, like a person.
I am a person.
Of
Yes.
course, you're a person.
Yeah.
We can do this, all right? And then we thought I can't carry on with that face. Look at it, I'm going to get nightmares with that face. I mean, he looks like he is labouring over a stool having just eaten human flesh.
It's a bit extreme.
No, I'm sorry, but that is true.
He's screwed. The meeting's in less than an hour.
Okay, so some background here. Right? Dwight is going to sell to a female client. He's their best salesman, but he has trouble talking to women, and they're trying to coach him through it. Right? And really what this is touching on is it's implying that there's a difference between the way men and women listen, right? And that's something I would love to have a discussion about in class, but unfortunately, with us being online, right, we're not going to have that discussion in person, right? But generally speaking, what I find in my classes is most people agree that men and women do listen very, very differently. Right? So, why is listening important? Right? Why is it important that we become good, effective, quality listeners? Well, reason number one is it's a vital skill in the real world. right? At some point, you guys, many of you probably already are, working jobs in the real world, right? And you're going to have to be listening to somebody, whether it's your boss, your coworker, or your subordinate. I had a friend of mine who started his own company, right? And he's like, well, I don't have to listen to anybody anymore. I'm the only employee, right? It's my company. I'm the boss. I'm also the employee, right? Finds out very quickly it's important you still listen to your customers, right? Now, he has nobody necessarily forcing him to do anything anymore, but it's very important that he listens to what the market is saying and what his customers are communicating back to him so he can actually produce a better product or service, right? It's estimated college students spend around 50% of their time listening, right? So that's you all, 50% of your time listening. It's half your time, right? That includes sleep in those studies, right? Now this includes everything, whether it's a lecture in class, whether it's having a conversation with your friend, right? This time that you spend listening to music, watching TV, right? So it encompasses everything, but it's still 50% of our time listening. If we're going to spend that much time doing something, we should at least be good at it. Okay. Technology has made listening more difficult. Right? You ever been in class and your phone vibrates and suddenly whatever the instructor out in front is saying seems less important than what the person in your pocket is saying? Right? So technology has made it more difficult. Our culture actually works against the development of quality listening skills. We have Google. Past generations, right, maybe didn't have Google. And immediately we think, this is going to be awesome. We can answer any question whenever we want. And that's true. You can go to Google, you can ask it any question, and you can find the answer to most things. But what we found, right, as the internet's exploded, social media's exploded, Google's exploded, we're actually overstimulated with too much information. Think about the news, right, and why it's become so volatile and negative. We're thrown so much information, we can't possibly read it all. And I like to call our generation the headline generation, because I know a lot of people who simply read the headlines of an article and they assume it's true. They see, oh, Trump's a racist, he must be a racist. Biden's corrupt, he must be corrupt. And they didn't even read what went on in the article. All they saw was the headline, and they just assumed, well, those two people suck. They're awful. Meanwhile, they're both running for president. Both have a really good chance of winning. Right? If you were to actually dive into those articles, you might find a couple things. Right? They're really one of three things. One, you might find out the headline was correct, right? That's a possibility. But more times than not, you find out that it's either clickbait, right? The headline is just trying to get you to click on the article and it doesn't exactly line up with what the title actually says. Or you would read down and find that there's inadequate reasoning and logical fallacies all throughout the article, right? The evidence that they're putting forward doesn't actually produce that conclusion. Right? The evidence they're putting forward does not make Biden corrupt and Trump racist. Right? Maybe there's some articles that do, right? And I'll leave that up to you guys to figure out. Right? But make sure that we're not just looking at headlines and just saying, oh, headline said that, must be true. Because the elementary thought process of children is that anything on TV is taken as fact. That's the truth now, because important people are on TV and they're on the internet. And that's almost bled into our culture as adults now. And it's absolutely ridiculous. It's a very childish way to reason, right? To make sure we're actually thinking through things and the logical soundness of different arguments and holding them to our own standards instead of just waiting for somebody else to tell us what to think. Leading into people telling us what to think is agenda setting theory. Okay? What this theory states, well, let's start here. It was developed in 1968. Now, I'm not going to ask you, hey, what year was agenda setting theory developed, right, on the test? I'm not concerned with that. What I am concerned with is kind of a time frame here. right? When this theory was developed, what it said was the media tells us what topics we should be thinking about, right? So political hot button issues, the media would say, we should be thinking about abortion. We should be thinking about illegal immigration. We should be thinking about free speech. We should be thinking about the Second Amendment, right? And the media would just leave it there. It'd say, hey, public, you need to think about these topics, right? So it wouldn't tell you how to think about them. Now, agenda setting theory, I think, probably had its time of reign where this was accurate, right? The media wasn't telling us what to think. It was just telling us what topics to think about, right? Through the 70s, probably through the 80s, and then somewhere through the 90s, things started to shift. And present day, I think it's very, very clear that agenda setting theory is pretty out of date. And the media has changed, completely changed, because the media doesn't just tell us, hey, here's what happened, you should be thinking about this. Instead, it says, here's what you should think, here's why I'm right, and here's why everyone else is wrong. I mean, turn on virtually almost any news station, and you're going to get that very message. Here's why I'm right, here's why you should think what I think, and here's why if you don't think what I think, you're wrong, just like everyone else who disagrees with me. Not exactly a healthy climate to live in. So that's agenda setting theory. Okay. 4 components of listening here: hearing, focus and attention, interpretation of the message, and evaluation of the message. Couple things. Number 1, I want you to notice again, hearing is just one aspect, one component of listening, right? You have to hear what someone is saying to actually be able to listen. It is a prerequisite to listen, but it's not the only component, okay? You need focus and attention, right? And then you interpret the message and you evaluate the message. Now, when you're listening, you're not like, oh my God, I heard it. Okay, I had my focus and my attention. Now I need to interpret that message, what was said, and then evaluate it. This really happens subconsciously and really simultaneously as you're listening, right? You don't have to stop and think about it, right? Your subconscious does the job for you. 5 functions of listening. Okay, we're going to just move through these pretty quickly just because they're pretty self-explanatory. Okay? First function of listening is listening to obtain information. Ideally, that's probably what you're doing right now. Right? If you're listening to this lecture, right, you're trying to pull out information that is important that might be on the exam, right? And maybe you can apply it to your real life in some way. Right? So you're trying to obtain information or learn, right? The second function is listening to respond. I think this is far too prevalent in our culture. And again, taking it back to the media, right? If you watch left-wing or right-wing media, either way, right? If I'm on a left-wing station, I bring somebody on the right, and we're going to have this debate, and somebody on the right talks, and boom, I cut them off, and I'm already telling them why they're wrong and why I'm right. I'm simply trying to come up with a retort, right, to prove them wrong, right? And on the other side, same thing, right? Somebody on the right brings, or a news station on the right brings somebody on the left on, does the same exact thing. Now, if you're just listening to respond, how are you ever going to come to any kind of middle ground, any kind of common ground, any kind of progress being made, right? If you're only ever trying to respond, all you're going to do is polarize the country even more and more and more, right? And that's where we're at. Okay. On the flip side, you can listen to actually understand the message, right? Listen to understand what the other person is saying, right? Not just to tell them why they're wrong. Now, ideally, you listen to understand the message and you examine the logical soundness of the argument that they're making, right? So you can do both of these, really. You can listen to understand and then also listen to respond. You can respond after you actually understand. But what's happening is we're responding without even understanding what the other side is saying, right? On one side, we're just calling everybody racist, and on the other side, we're saying they're idiots. And it's like, okay. Again, no progress, further polarization. Right? Listening with empathy. Right? This is listening to understand the message one step further. Not only am I trying to understand the message, I'm actually trying to climb into the shoes of the person speaking and see things from their perspective. Right? Imagine what it would be like to be in their shoes. And the fifth function is listening for enjoyment. And this is really straightforward, right? If you listen to music, right, or a podcast or something that you enjoy, right, you're simply listening for enjoyment. Okay, I want to talk about kind of a listening communication continuum here, right? So you have a continuum. On one side, you have masculine. On the other side, you have feminine, and everybody exists along this continuum, okay? Right? Feminine over here, masculine over here, okay? Now, those words, masculine, immediately, right, you think of men, right? People whose sex is male. Feminine, right? You immediately probably think of females, right? Now, is it true that females tend to be more feminine in the way they listen and communicate, and men tend to be more masculine in the way they listen and communicate? Yeah. If we're talking about a collectivistic view, right? Women are more likely to communicate more femininely, and men are more likely to communicate more masculinely. But just because you're a female doesn't mean you can't communicate or listen in a masculine way, and vice versa. Right? I think I probably communicate and listen in a more feminine way as a guy, right? As a male. Now, something that's cool and that we usually talk about in class is one of these better than the other, right? Do you think people who are better listeners and communicators are feminine or masculine? Right? Somebody who's masculine, they're content-oriented. They listen to respond. They seek to dominate disagreement. They're assertive and they take control of the situation. Those last two really go together. Right? Somebody who's feminine in the way they listen and communicate. They're probably relationship-oriented. They listen to understand. They seek to find common ground in disagreement, and they listen first and talk second. And usually what happens is my students say, well, clearly, the way this continuum works is the farther you're towards feminine, the better communicator you are, and the farther you are towards masculine, the worse communicator you are. That's not true. Right? That's not true. Right? Ideally, you can actually do both of these. Right? Ideally, what makes somebody a quality listener and a quality communicator is the ability to pull out each one of these when they're necessary. Right? So I know when to be content-oriented versus relationship-oriented. I know when to listen to understand versus listen to respond, or ideally do them both simultaneously. I know when to seek to dominate disagreement and be assertive and take control of the situation, and I know when to seek common ground in a disagreement. I know when to listen first and talk second. Right? Because if I know when to do each one of those things, right, I have all the tools to be a successful listener and communicator. Okay? Now, you could make an argument, right? Most of the time, being a more feminine communicator is going to be better. You could make that argument. You could make the opposite argument as well, right? But generally speaking, you should seek to be competent at every single one of these, right? And you can be both a masculine and feminine communicator and listener, and be able to pull out those tools when they're needed. Right? Okay, a few barriers to effective listening. Number one is low interest level. Right? If you're not interested in something, it becomes very difficult to listen to it. You've probably experienced that in school on multiple occasions. Right? That's why I try to keep things as interesting as I possibly can. Right? That's why I give you assignments, or sometimes you get to watch TV. Sometimes you get to learn things about yourself. And I try to keep things as interesting as I can because I believe learning happens, right, when people are enjoying themselves. Number two, this is one of my biggest pet peeves. Criticizing the speaker rather than the message. And we do this all the time. Somebody starts speaking and they're saying something, and immediately we're criticizing the person rather than what they're actually saying. Right? And a really, really cool example that I've seen of this are videos where, and I've seen these on both sides. So somebody goes into a college campus, right, that is generally very left-leaning, and they start asking students, hey, what do you think about these quotes from Donald Trump? Right, and they read off these lists of quotes, right, and immediately the students are like, those are racist quotes. He's a terrible person. That's a xenophobic message. I just can't believe we have this guy in office. And then they say, oh, by the way, those weren't actually Donald Trump quotes. Those were quotes from Barack Obama. And immediately the students are like, oh my gosh, wow, that's crazy. I had no idea. And I've seen this on the other side, where they go into maybe a small town that's very right-leaning, right? And they're like, hey, I want you to listen to these quotes from Joe Biden or Barack Obama, right? Could be either one, right? And what do they say? Wow, that guy's an idiot. I can't believe he actually said that. I mean, that's just a moronic thing to say. And then they say, oh, by the way, those actually were quotes from Donald Trump, and the same exact reaction. Oh, I had no idea. Why does this happen? Why does this happen? We've already developed this idea in our heads of who these people are and what we think of them, right? Do I like or dislike Donald Trump? Do I like or dislike Joe Biden? And so whatever comes out of their mouth at that point, it's going to be viewed according to what I think of that person, right? And so you get, literally, that's why people think it's okay for Trump to say something, not for Obama to say it. Or people think it's okay for Obama to say something, not for Trump to say it. And it's just unbelievable. It's absolutely unbelievable. We start criticizing the speaker and we put these stipulations on, well, because he's, this person, he can't say this. Right? It's going to be interpreted differently depending on who says it, which is ridiculous. It shouldn't be. We should simply critique the message, not the speaker. Okay. A few other barriers to effective listening. Distractions, right? We've already talked about the phone in the pocket. Confirmation bias. This sort of goes along with the example that I just talked about, right? Because we want to be told our candidate is good, the other candidate is bad. So whatever they say, whatever my candidate said must be good, whatever the other candidate said must be bad. And we're just feeding our own confirmation bias. Right? Boom, my candidate's good. I didn't even evaluate his message, but he must have been good because he's just a good guy. He has all the answers. And the other guy, he's just an evil guy. So whatever he said, no matter what it was, must have been terrible. Stop feeding your own confirmation bias. Start examining the message. Separate the message from the speaker. Who cares who said it? Let's talk about if the message makes sense. That's the only thing that matters in the end. Okay? And then finally, fake attention. And we've probably all been guilty of this, right? Where you act like you're paying attention to somebody. Maybe you're nodding along, right? Not actually listening to what they're saying, right? Don't be that guy, right? Be a good listener. Be authentic. Okay. These come from our textbook, actually. The textbook says how you should judge the accuracy of the speaker's conclusions. I'm just going to read through them here. Okay? And there's one in here I think is absolutely ridiculous. Shouldn't be on the list. A couple where I'm like, okay, could be on the list, could do without it. Okay, so here they are. Is the speaker qualified to draw the conclusion? Has the speaker actually observed the concept or issue? Does the speaker have vested interest in the message, so are they biased? Does the speaker present adequate evidence to support the conclusion? Is the evidence relevant to the conclusion? Has refuting evidence been presented, and does the message contain invalid or inadequate reasoning? The one on here I think is absolutely ridiculous, and I get a little fired up about the textbook actually putting it in there because it's being taught to college students, and it's absolutely ridiculous, is the speaker qualified to draw the conclusion? That is ridiculous. You think I need credentials? I need to be qualified to draw this conclusion? If my argument makes sense, it makes sense. That would be like me and Hannah making the same argument, right? And Hannah makes an argument, and everybody's like, that doesn't make sense. Well, what's wrong with the argument? Well, you don't have a master's in communication, so you can't draw that conclusion. You can't make that argument. And then I get up there and I make the same exact argument, and they say, wow, that makes a lot of sense. Well, it didn't make sense when Hannah made the argument because she doesn't have a master's in communication, but Gabe does, so that argument makes sense. That is ridiculous. And we do this all the time. We start to think, well, this person's more qualified, right, to talk on this social issue or this social issue, and that's ridiculous, right? We start to think, right, we start to base how qualified somebody is to talk about a certain topic on their race and gender, which is absolutely, well, quite frankly, racist and sexist. Now, do those people maybe have a unique insight? Maybe. Right? Maybe. But at the end of the day, the logical soundness of the argument is what should matter, right? Adequate evidence to support the conclusion. Evidence that's relevant to the conclusion, right? Refuting evidence presented, and there's no invalid or inadequate reasoning. At the end of the day, that's all that matters. Right? And stop thinking that, oh, well, I need to have certain credentials, right? That's absolutely ridiculous. It's absurd. It's absurd to imply I need to have some sort of credentials to make an argument, right? Now, if we're talking about taking advice from somebody, right? Obviously, I want to get medical advice from a doctor. That makes a lot of sense, right? But that's simply because I can't even understand the arguments, right? That stuff's so far over my head, right? The general public. Right? But if we're just talking about making an argument, again, really those last four are what matter. Now, if somebody does have vested interest in the message, meaning they're biased, right, maybe I examine those last four a little bit more closely. Right? Just something to think about. So how do we improve our listening competencies? How do we get better at listening? Number one is we practice. Right? And you guys have good opportunities now while you're in school. Practice listening to things that maybe you don't want to, but are important. Right? Can we increase our attention span from 10 minutes to 15 minutes? Right? How long can you pay attention and actually get valuable information out of it? Okay. Number two, focus on the message rather than the speaker. Right? This goes back here. Stop asking, well, is the speaker actually qualified? Does he have the necessary credentials? No, does his frickin' argument make sense or not? Simple and plain. Okay. Focus on the message. Separate the message from the speaker and examine the message. Those last four, right down there. Okay. Avoid distractions, and then check your biases. What does it mean? What does it look like to check your biases? Checking your biases looks like actively seeking out opposing information to your arguments. Actively considering the other side. Taking steps away from creating echo chambers in your life. That's what checking your biases looks like. And we don't want to do it because it's uncomfortable, but it's really, really important. That's all I have for you guys today. I will get another lecture uploaded here on Wednesday. Okay. Again, exam will be taken through Talon. It'll be password protected. I'll give you the password. You guys will have one opportunity to take it, so you can't open the test up, close it, come back, right? You have to complete it all in one setting. Okay. If you have any other questions, please reach out to me, and I will get back to you as soon as possible. I'm looking forward to getting back into the classroom next week, a week from today, and really getting to engage with everyone again. All right. You guys have a great rest of your day, and I guess you guys will see me on Wednesday.